Welcome back! In this video we will continue writing our game logic by adding some information about how to control the model, so that the user knows how to control the model. So what we need to do now is to add another text to inform the user that he can control the model by pressing the arrow keys. So what I did is I downloaded another font here so that it would look a little different from the text we have already. And what we need to do first now is to make this function here more generic, because we are about to create more than one font. So let's open our create font function here and let's make these two parameters of this function. So let's call the first one path. And the second one we will call font size. And now let's pass these parameters here. Okay, this function is now generic. What we need to do now is to change the prototype of this function here. So copy this one and let's add it here. This one is a double. And of course, we need to change this function call here now. So let's pass the path and the font size here. And this one was 50. Let's now rerun our application to see if it's still working. And yeah, it is still working. And by the way, you might realize now that I changed the colors here. This is because I was not very happy with them, but you can choose any colors you like. Very good. Let's now create our second font, and this should be very easy because we did it already. So open our load scene function here and let's first create a unique identifier for it. And this one we will call small font. And all we need to do now is to copy these lines here and change the values. So let's set this one to small font. And this is the other font. And let's this time take the 22 and let's see if it works. And yeah, this is our expected exit code here. Great, let's now create our control info text by first creating a unique identifier again. And let's call this one control info text and just choose a random number. So let's put this new text underneath the line we created and let's center the text as well. So what you can do now is to copy these lines and change the text first. Then change the ID. Let's choose a different color here. And let's change the position. So let's set the value of 130 here. And this value is fine because we wanted to center this text as well. And of course, let's use our new font here. Very good. Let's now run our application. Very good. As you can see, this is our control information text. Well, it looks kind of boring now, And let's do something very interesting here. Let's add an effect for it. And I think what would be very cool to do is to add a blinking effect for our text. This would catch the user's attention and he will focus on this text very quickly. And this is what we want actually, because we want to inform the user, and the user, on the other hand, wants to know what he needs to do. So let's write a function for that, and this one will be generic. And let's call this one blink text. And the first parameter will be our engine again. And the second one will be the ID of our text. Let's add the definition here. And this will be our text ID. So how does a blinking effect work? Well, since this really is just a basic tutorial, I cannot go too much into detail here, but to create a blinking effect, we need to manipulate the alpha channel of this text. And basically said, the alpha value will set the text transparency. What we need to do is to fade our text in and out, and we need to do this very quickly, which would end in a blinking effect. Let's now create our result first and return it. And as I said, there are two things our text could do. First is fading in and the second one is fading out. And let's create a variable for that, and let's make this one a static one. And let's set this one to false, which means that we will start with fading out. And for that, let's write an if statement. So if fade in, this is where we will write our fade in instruction. Else means fade out. This is where we will write our fade out instruction. And these two will always switch. So in a very, very short period of time, and this is how our blinking effect will work. Very good. Let's now play around with the alpha value of the text. And since we need this value, every time this function is being entered, we need a variable for that. And this is a static one as well. And to receive the alpha value, we use getColor. Of course, we need to enter the ID. And we use the member alpha. Let's now think of how fast we want our text to blink, and let's create a variable for that as well. And let's use a value of 240. And this means that the alpha value will be changed by 240 per second. Very good. Let's also create an interval in which the alpha value is allowed to change. So let's set a min value and a max value. Let's choose 50 here. And let's choose the max value really, because it cannot be higher than 255 anyway. Okay, let's now start with our calculations. And let's start with the fade in one. So if we want to fade in our text, we want the alpha value to increase. So for that, we simply type in alpha and let's add our alpha factor here. So this is our whole calculation really for our fade in instruction. But there's one more thing we should do actually, because we want to ensure that everything will run at the same speed no matter on what local machine you run your application. And there's a function for that called step. So this function will convert this passed value to a more suitable value based on your computer architecture. And if you don't get this by now, don't worry. This is an issue I will handle in the advanced tutorial. Great, let's now apply our new calculated alpha value to our text. And for that, we have a function called color operation. And this function will execute a color operation for our text, like blending, multiplying, and so on. But what we need really is blending, because we want to change the alpha value only. Let's now set the appropriate values. The first one is our text ID again. The second one is a color value. And since we want to operate blending operation, these first three values are not important. But the last one, which is the alpha value, is very important. And here we will pass alpha. And the last parameter is our actual operation. Which in this case is alpha OP. So again, this is our calculation and this is our color operation. But you may notice now that this value can be higher than 255. But this is not what we want, so we need to check this as well. So as long as this value here is less than 255, we are good. So let's write an if statement for that. Let's say if alpha is less than this max value here, we can execute our color operation. But else, which means that our alpha value would reach our limit, we want to stop the fade in. And stopping the fade in here means that we will start fading out. So setting this variable to false will execute the fade out instruction. But before we would reach our fade out instruction here, we should ensure that our alpha value won't be higher than 255. So let's copy this line here. And let's set our max value. Okay, very good. So this small piece of code will fade in our text very quickly. And doing this now for the fade out instruction here is very easy. We just need to think the other way around. So let's copy these lines here. And in this case, we do not want to increase the alpha value. We would like to decrease the alpha value. And of course, we want to check if the alpha value is larger than the alpha minimum value. Because as long as this is true, we want to decrease the alpha value here. And else we want to stop fading out our text, because then we would like to start fading in our text again. So let's set this one to true. And of course, here we need to set our alpha minimum value. And that's it. This is all we need for our blinking effect. And if you don't get this by now, just use some output functions and print out the alpha value on screen. This might help you to understand how this effect works. Let's now use our function inside our gameLogic function. So open the gameLogic function now. And of course, check the result first. And let's call our function. And you realize now that we would need our text ID inside this function here. So let's open our loadScene function and let's make this one a global again. And now we are able to use this ID inside our function. And I'm excited now. Let's run our application. And there you go. This is our blinking effect. That does look way more interesting than it did before. Well, that was fun adding this cool effect to our application, wasn't it? And I hope to see you in the next video.